Hey everybody, Pastor Dan at Coverstone, Living Room Ministries, Brooksville, Kentucky. I'm going to be sharing a dream here in just a minute, but I want to make a couple of comments first. If you're watching this on the Facebook Brace Yourself page, we are watching carefully. Jay and I have been working to figure out some things. We do have a concern about potential and ongoing censorship issues. I'm going to keep my personal Facebook page for now and see what happens. But we will be moving the Brace Yourself page to an app called Jump. Um, and Jay and I have both, we've had some conversations with the leaders of that group, and I feel very supportive of what they're doing. Um, and so we'll be moving to Jump. I can endorse and support the type of social media platform that they have and greatly appreciate it. So once again, I'll be moving to Jump. At least we'll be moving the Brace Yourself page to Jump. And when I'm done with the video, I will be going onto my page and posting a link so that you can link there as well. And I encourage you to support the platform and be a part of it. And I don't know if you register or you just line up or you join that. I will be doing a personal Jump page as well when this probably by the end of this week, maybe sooner. But I'll be moving to Jump. The Brace Yourself page primarily. We'll still have the YouTube channel. We'll still have my personal page on Facebook, but we will be moving to Jump, and I encourage you to support that as well. And I will be posting the link for that when I'm done. And I want to just say a few things before I share this dream. And this had nothing to do with accusations. This is just I'm just going to share something about my life. I am a very conservative Christian, and most of you already know that. Um, I grew up with a father who was a drunk, but he had been a World War II Air Force veteran. My dad had a business in Terre Haute, Indiana. He was very patriotic. Matter of fact, when he put advertisements in for his store, he always had a picture of the flag. Every Flag Day, he always posted flag facts, and I grew up knowing how to fold the flag, how to treat the flag, knew every flag fact there was very schooled in American history, the presidents, and great to. I'm thankful to have been born and raised in a home with a dad that loved America. I grew up learning presidential history. I watched every inauguration and State of the Union address, going back to the time of Nixon. Even though I was just a little boy, I was sitting in my dad's lap watching it. And a lot of people lately are wanting to make some strong statements that, well, I'm probably just viewing history through my dreams and this and that. I simply share what I see, and I ask people to pray and to pray and to seek what they hear from it on those dreams, and uh, and leave it really kind of up to people. A lot of times we say things and it's still left for people to figure out what to do and pray, and don't just in 15 minutes, oh, that's what that dream means. You need to pray and seek God's face. I share my dreams with several people um, before I post them. Now, this is the first time I've not done that, and I will be sharing my notes with them when I'm done. But this dream that I had, I'm calling it the plumb line dream, and I've had it since basically between January 9th and January 11th. I had it last. It started on Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday, and I had a little bit more of it last night, which was Sunday. Um, and the reason I share the dreams, and especially this one, I want the church to understand. I've been saying brace yourself. The Lord's been saying brace yourself to the first dream I had from the very beginning. And and I've been trying to warn the church. I've been trying to warn the church desperately to say there are hard times coming, difficult things are happening. We are already seeing a great amount of censorship, and if you study history, you will see very easily that once they try to silence a group, they try to do other things to a group, or they come after the group. So please keep those things in mind, and I ask you to simply pray about the dreams. Um, Although I have folks that I trust to bring interpretation to it, I'm thankful for those. And there's a very small circle. I do not intend to increase that small circle. These are people that I love, I care about, I trust, who have proven themselves both to me in friendship and in ministry. And it seems like every time I give a dream or somebody else interprets, they just tear into it. And I know a lot of folks. Typically, I get 300 to 400 different interpretations of dreams. And I'm just going to say very clearly, I think this one's pretty clear going in. And matter of fact, I ended up on the floor after waking up from the final part of this, because the last thing that I saw. And I'm just wanting to encourage the church to stay strong, to stay rooted, to stay grounded, to stay trusting the Lord for whatever comes, whatever we face, for whatever is coming down the pike. And this is an even greater warning dream to the church. So here's the dream that I had on January 9th to 11th, and I'm calling it the Plumb Line Dream. I saw a bright, sunlit sky, no clouds. And I saw the man that I see often in my dreams walking down the streets of New York. And I saw the traditional skyline, even saw the Empire State Building, so I knew exactly where I was. The man was dressed in a first century robe, like any Jewish male would have worn in public, and as well he had the prayer shawl over his head. His pace was steady, and the people walked by him oblivious to the fact he was carrying this rope. It was just the rope was hanging down in his hand, and it was hanging down to the ground. Okay, and at the bottom of the rope appeared to be a large stone tablet that resembled the traditional tablet like the Ten Commandments. And the rope stayed tight. Every step he took, it didn't move, it didn't sway, it didn't move at all. And then I found myself that I was walking beside him as I was walking beside him in the dream, and I'm watching this rope that just stands steady and doesn't move at all. So I asked him why the rope and stone never moved, why it didn't wobble as he was walking. And he stated clearly, my plumb line never moves. And I asked where we were going, and he simply said, to do business. And then we passed a street sign that said Wall Street, and we walked further down the street. We walked several feet past that sign, and then he stopped and looked into the distance at a taller building. And he held that rope up, and he measured the balance of the plumb line against the building ahead. I could see that the building was obviously tilted away from the line that he was holding. And the man then he put both hands on the building and began to shake it back and forth. And it kept rocking even after he took his hands off. So the building's moving back and forth like this, up and down, or not up and down, but just sideways and just moving. Some of the windows began to suddenly open, and I saw office furniture. I saw people who were falling out of these windows as the building swayed. There were files and there were folders and there was currency of all kind. It was not just American currency. There was currency of all kind floating, the dollar bills floating, coins. Saw precious metals. I saw things of value that were just kind of floating down. But specifically currency. And as soon as they hit the ground, this violent wind began to sweep them up into the air, and they never came down again. Now, the people on the ground, they were bruised, they were struggling to walk, and their suits, they were all dressed in suits, both male and female, like professional suits. And they were covered in what looked like tar and pitch. It was thick, almost like just like tar and pitch. And it glued them to the ground, so they could move, but they couldn't get up. They were just kind of stuck there. And the pitch had an oily sheen to it. And the man then told me to follow him, so I did. So I leave this scene of all the currency had gone up into the air. Files and the folders and the people were there on the ground, but the people were covered in stuff, but nobody else was. Then I could see the Capitol building on the horizon, and we walked briskly towards it, saying nothing on the walk. He had his face set just to go to those places. He stood at the bottom of the steps of the Capitol, and he held up the rope, and he held up the rope in his right hand. And the Capitol was twisted much the same way as the Wall Street building was. The rope was here, but the Capitol was off. It was not lined up straight. And then the man raised his right foot into the air, and he took off his New Testament style sandal. And then he brought his foot down very hard on the first step up to the Capitol. I mean, he brought it down hard. And the building began to rock back and forth, and soon people were falling out of the windows and the doors. Documents, and there were desk nameplates that were falling onto the ground, along with people who were all landing on their knees hard. When they fell out the windows, they just fell on their knees hard. You could actually hear their knees almost pop when they hit. So there definitely would have been pain. And then they were screaming out in pain, so obviously they were. These people then they were covered in a sticky purple syrup. It wasn't that was the color. It was a sticky, dark, um, just a dark purple syrup that was as thick as molasses, and it was hindering them from walking. They were trying to get up and walk, but they couldn't. It just it wasn't gluing them to the ground. They could move, but just not as effectively. And when they did get up, they would slip. They would get covered in the mess again. It was all over them. So some of them had the syrup all over their faces, all over their hands, their feet, their knees. Their suits were being ruined, but they were covered in it. Half of them were on the ground weeping. Some of them were laying on the ground in fetal positions and groaning. And some of these people were shaking their fists at the man, but they said nothing. And then they dropped their heads to hide their faces. So they're shaking their fists. They're not saying a word. They're putting their heads down. Half of them were weeping. Half of them laid on the ground in the fetal position and just groaned. I mean, just groaned like they were in intense pain. And then the man told me, follow him again. At this time, the sun set, and it was clearly dark. It was nighttime. And the next thing I saw was a church building. It was modern architecture, but on top of it, it had a large, seemingly out of place, neon green cross on the roof, and it was glowing. And it glowed from like white to green, almost like it was on a circuit, and it was just, it would go white to green and then fade, white to green and fade, like it was flashing, but doing it very slowly over time. So it was almost like it was set on a switch. The man walked up to the church, and he took off his outer robe, and he took off the prayer shawl. And he appeared to grow considerably larger than the church. And he placed both hands on the church and lifted them into the air. He did not put the plumb line out first. He just walked right up to the church. He grabbed it by his hands. He placed both hands on the church and he lifted it into the air. He looked right at me and he said, I warned them. He then shook the church aggressively and violently, and he shook it for several moments. The hands on Wall Street, the hands on the Capitol he'd been like a push, and then he took his hands off and they began to shake. They continued to shake. But he actually shook the church aggressively and violently, and he shook it for several moments. And the lights and the cross went out. The windows broke open. I saw the outer walls begin to tear from each other. And then he slammed the church down hard, just on the ground. And the front doors broke open. And the doors actually fell off the hinges. And I watched people stumble out of that church like they were dizzy, and they started to run away as fast as they could. And as they ran, they were throwing Bibles to the ground and not even looking back. They were trying to get out of there as fast as they could. There were people that identified as pastors who were running as well, while covering their faces with a jacket. They brought their jackets up over their heads, like, kind of like hiding their heads like a hoodie would do, but just the back of the jackets over their head, and they ran. And they were running into each other. They were running just crazy, but they were running with a purpose to get out of there as fast as they could. So I identified some of those men and people who were running as pastors, leaders. Many of them just kind of shook their heads and walked out and denied. And there was a group of people that I couldn't see their faces, but as these people left the church and walked out of the church, as they were walking by, they were denying even knowing who Jesus was. I never knew him. I don't know him. That's not my church. I just go. Things like that. They were as if they were embarrassed for even being a part of the church that had just been shaken. They were walking away from it, and they were walking away from it briskly. Some were going slower because of the damage of being shaken, but they're walking away from the church. And then I was able to see inside the church, and I saw damage. I saw pews that were turned over and broken in half, wood split in many ways in the building. I saw lights were hanging from damaged ceiling tiles and things like that. And I saw a chandelier was hanging all the way. The chandelier was on the ground, and the electrical wire was all the way up to the ceiling. It was that much damage in there. And then I saw there was an oak pulpit that was still intact at the front of the church. The platform had been all messed up. You could just tell the church had been shaken by this man. Electrical damage, wall damage, structural damage. But that pulpit was intact at the front of the church, but it had been chipped by debris and appeared to be leaning just slightly. And then I saw the altar area. And there seemed to be there were hundreds of people. And they were tied together with ropes and even chains. And they were connected to each other, but they were also primarily connected to the altars on both sides at the front of the church. They were clutching Bibles to their chests. And so much that the Bibles had handprints in them from where you could tell they were clutching them and gripping them so that the shaking wouldn't rip them out of their hands. That's what I'm supposing. They looked weary. They looked shaken. There was some of them who had been damaged, but they had joyful faces. There were smiles on their faces because the shaking was done. And there were some in that group, though, as they were tied together, that realized that there were some who'd passed away and appeared to have been hit with debris from the shaking. And the ones who remained alive, they were shedding tears for them. But they got up and they kind of not necessarily untied themselves. They didn't really untie themselves from each other at the altar, but they got up and they began to kind of clean up the area and kick away the debris. And they were just trying to make sense of what they were seeing. And then the man walked in. And he looked around as if he was assessing all that he saw. And he said these words: "You took warning, and you were good to do so. Your obedience has been noted, and there will be fruit both here and in heaven. Though shaken and broken, you will arise, my bride, and work until I come." So once again, the last thing he said was, "You took warning, and were good to do so. Your obedience has been noted, and there will be fruit both here and in heaven. Though shaken and broken, you will arise, my bride, and work until I come." The one thing I want to specify is that both on Wall Street and in Washington, D.C., this man held the plumb line up. When he walked up to the church, he didn't. He simply walked up to the church with the expectation they knew what the standard was and it had been missed. And I want to once again encourage the church that's watching this right now, believers that are watching this right now. We're already seeing censorship issues, and history confirms once again after they silence you, they come for you. Now, am I saying that's going to happen? All I'm saying is I know that a shaking is coming to the church. And he's going to shake us with both hands. He's going to shake us hard. And most likely that's going to involve persecution. A lot of people want to continue to say the church is never going to go through hard times, never going to have difficulty. Then we need, as the church, to apologize to every country where the church is persecuted and opposed, especially within the 1040 window. We are not exempt from persecution, the things that are coming. And although there's a whole lot of things happening that we're not for sure of, a lot of videos about insurrection acts been passed. This has been done. That's been done. There's a whole lot of things. Most of the things we have no idea for sure what is happening at this moment. And for anyone to come out and say, well, I've got this information, that information, fine, you can say that. But there's a lot of videos that are out there right now that are saying certain things have happened, certain things haven't. And can they be confirmed? Not always. Some can. But there's a whole lot of confusion. And all I know is this: the Lord is showing me and been confirming in my heart and my mind for years now, not just since the dream started back in June. He's been confirming to me for years that persecution is coming to the American church. It's coming. It's coming. and the censorship is just the first step. So the thing about the people in the church, they were tied to the altar. They were not going to let go. They had their Bibles in their hands. They were not going to let go. They were secure in their faith. They were rooted and grounded in the Word, and they were connected to the altar, and they weren't leaving it. So, American church, you better make sure you're where you need to be with Jesus. American church, you better repent of some of the things that you're involved with. You better repent. We better make sure that our theology lines up with the Word of God, and not political correctness. You better make sure that your heart and your mind are set on Jesus. You better make sure you're taking up your cross after denying yourself and you're following Him. You better make sure that you're living the kind of life that God wants you to live, because that's what it's all about. I don't know when Jesus is coming. All I know is I want to be ready when He does. And I believe the word's very clear. Judgment begins in the house of God. That means persecution is coming. It will come. It's not just going to go away. We know even during the tribulation, there will be great tribulation among believers, with beheading being the primary way it happens. So take the dream, pray about it, pray through it. I'm not nearly as worried about Wall Street and the Capitol, but I'm very concerned about the church. I'm concerned about where the church is. After I put the first dream out, people were praying and people were excited and people were thinking about things. I think we went through a law. We said, okay, we can just let go. We can't let down. We can't stop praying. We can't stop seeking. We can't stop staying aggressive in our prayers. We need to pray aggressively, pray specifically, and pray strategically. That God gets us ready to do the things He's calling us to do, and that we stay on target and we stay on task. And that whatever we do not deny Jesus for any reason, whatever cost, whatever price comes against us, that we do not deny His name. Because Jesus made it very clear, if you deny me before men, I'll deny you before the Father. So, now will we survive? There's always a remnant, there's always a core, there's always people. But the thing about persecution always spreads the gospel. Persecution always purifies. Persecution always takes us to a place we've never been before and strengthens us through it. So, church, I believe we're going to go through some fire, but I'm thankful that the fire purifies and that the dross will be taken off and out will come a vessel for the smith. That's a proverb. So once again, that's what I'm sharing today. I just want to remind you, we're going to be moving to the Brace Yourself page. We'll be moving to Jump. I'll be posting a link for that. It's a group that I can support and endorse, and looking forward to being on their page. My personal Facebook page is going to remain up. Our YouTube channel is going to remain up. If something else happens, we'll see what goes on, but Jump is going to be a place that we're headed to right now. So in my prayer video this morning, I made the statement that we were considering a jump to something different, and looking forward to being part of that platform, as well as Facebook for right now. And I do hope that we stay faithful and stay focused and stay rooted and grounded in Jesus. So thanks so much for listening. Take it, pray about it, discern it, and occupy till He comes. So God bless.